After startling accusations rocked the palace to its core, it seemed near impossible to imagine the Duke of York would actually agree to sit down for an interview.
But he did, and what happened next would change the crown forever.
It's a wet November day in 2019 at Buckingham Palace. Top secret TV crew is setting up for an interview like no other.
We've come to Buckingham Palace in highly unusual circumstances.
After months of negotiating, Prince Andrew finally agreed to speak about his alleged connections to the disgraced Jeffrey Epstein.
To some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people. But it would be a considerable stretch to say that he was a very, very close friend.
That was just one of many answers the Duke of York gave that day that raised eyebrows.
And of course, the Prince Andrew was a car crash, so the blowback on this is going to be huge.
And saying, you know, he went to Epstein's house to say we can't be friends, but then stayed there for 4 days.
Right. There are now questions about whether Prince Andrew should be stripped of his royal title and effectively retire completely.
Now, the former TV producer who convinced Prince Andrew to tell all is taking us beyond the palace gates in an explosive new book, revealing what really happened once the cameras stopped rolling.
Oh.
And the author of Scoops, behind the scenes of the BBC's most shocking interviews, Sam McAllister, joins us now. Hello, Sam.
Pleasure to see you both.
You were a producer for Newsnight, which is the BBC programme that Prince Andrew appeared on. Talk us through the early negotiations with Prince Andrew's team. I mean, were they eager to speak from the start?
Well, at the beginning, as you can probably imagine, this felt like it was going to be a road to nowhere. So on my first negotiation with the palace, I'd been in touch with them for about 6 months before I went there in person in the May before this interview happened. And I'll be honest with you guys, I was a producer going there thinking that this was just going to be an experience. I didn't for 1 second, and this was before Epstein died, before things got really, really bad, I did not for 1 second think that he would agree to come on our ferocious programme. But there we are. Things changed, things happened. The negotiation went on for months and months. Trust was built. His position became invidious. And that negotiation that I had with Amanda Thirsk, his chief of staff, obviously turned into the most extraordinary interview that any of us had ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. To all of that. Now, the Duke, so as we know, finally agreed to meet you. And in doing so, he brought along someone you weren't expecting to meet, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can imagine how much you strategize about these kinds of negotiations. It's what I've been doing for 10 years of my life. And I had strategized to meet a robust, rambunctious, spirited man, as the Duke of York clearly is. And then we arrive, and the curveball of curveballs, someone is with him. Now, I was expecting a lawyer, guys. I'm not gonna lie. I'm an expert myself. That's who I thought it would be. But it was his daughter, Princess Beatrice. And imagine doing this negotiation about the delicacies of this situation, about sexual predator, about terrible allegations against the Duke of York in front of his daughter. It was an extraordinary curveball.
Wow.
And what was her role? Like, did she interject? Did she intervene? Did he consult with her? Why was she there?
Well, I think they may have been going to do something afterwards. I'm not entirely sure. But clearly her role was that of a loving daughter whose father is accused of terrible things, who wants to protect his best interests. Now, our program's an extremely ferocious one, so it doesn't make the most natural sense to do the program. I had argued throughout that if you're going to do an interview, then you must do it with someone like Emily Maitlis, who is the kite mark of professionalism and brilliance, so that it wasn't a soft interview. Otherwise, people will say, why did you bother? And she was clearly there to ask very sensible questions to protect her father's interests. And I answered all those questions with courtesy and with clarity. But obviously, it was very different to negotiating with him alone.
What was that like? What was she like? I mean, my kids watch something on this show and they're so embarrassed. What was it like for her, sitting there, hearing this stuff face to face and having to deal with that?
Well, isn't it unimaginable? I mean, it's really unimaginable to have to listen to that. But remember that she had, unfortunately, been listening to these allegations, not for months, but for years. This was something that had hung over the Duke of York's head for so long, and obviously expedited by the things that happened after my first negotiation with them, with Epstein being arrested, then dying, of course, everything that happened with Ghislaine Maxwell. So unfortunately for her, she had heard it many, many times. And unfortunately for her again, she then had to hear it in that context and then globally.
Sam, why do you think the palace went along with the idea of doing an interview? Because it was a great interview. It was a disaster for him. Why do you think it went ahead?
I feel that that particular occasion, all I can do is draw inferences from what I've learned during the time I was there and afterwards. It really felt like he was operating in a vacuum. It was kind of like he was there with his chief of staff in his royal household, as they call it, doing as he wished. The eye was off the ball when it came to Prince Andrew. And so I feel that the reason he did it was twofold. One, he believed that he could vindicate himself because his life had been seriously impeded by these terrible allegations. And secondly, he wanted to get back to what he'd done before, walk his daughter down the aisle at her wedding, have his 60th birthday party, live the extraordinary and privileged life that he'd been lucky to live so many years.
So, cocky, confident, arrogant, entitled, these are some of the words. As he was sitting there before the cameras were rolling, is that the Prince Andrew you had in front of you, or is it someone who was a bit worried about the moments ahead?
Well, I have to be honest, there's a very particular relationship between a negotiator and a prospective interviewee. There's an intimacy in that sense. And obviously, we had spoken for many hours at the negotiation. He arrived very early to the interview, a producer's worst nightmare, and my presenter wasn't even there. And so we were chit-chatting. So I would have to say I was a lot more nervous than he was. I was very aware that this was the interview of my career, and as was Emily, and he seemed extremely relaxed. So the disparity between the two of us was writ large in those initial communications.
There were so many things Prince Andrew said that would go viral after the interview. The fact that he didn't sweat. When you were hearing those words come out of his mouth, could you believe what you were hearing? And did you see him sweat during the interview? Because it was a tough interview.
Well, I have to say I was definitely sweating. I can tell you that for nothing. I don't have that condition. I would say the reason is that it was so extraordinary for me was, funnily enough, because I'd already heard that. I had heard that in the negotiation several days before. And as an ex-criminal barrister, you can imagine how extraordinary it was to hear those explanations, the alibi and, of course, the sweating explanation. I did not believe that that would be said on camera. So it was a double shock. First, the shock of hearing it again, and the double shock that this was now down for posterity forever, for the world to see as his explanation of what had or hadn't happened. It was really extraordinary.
You must have been able to anticipate hearing the world all rolling its eyes in unison when we heard that, right? This is only one of many interviews you detail in your book. Who else can we expect to read about in Scoops?
Well, absolutely. I've been very lucky in my career that I've met some extraordinary people. There's everyone in there from Stormy Daniels to Sean Spicer, who used to work for President Trump, Amy Schumer, and most memorably, the handshake of the decade, I would say, for all the wrong reasons, Julian Assange.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. What amazing work you do. If we ever see your name come up on our phone and Sam McAllister wants to speak to you, I'm not answering it, just putting that there. I think you're a little bit too good at what you do, Sam.
That's very kind of you. Pleasure to speak with you.
It's Sam McAllister. Don't pick up, Larry. It can't end well.
Well, no, it would be because I've told Sam to call you, employed Sam to call you. Good on you, Sam.
Guys. I know I've been blocked. It's fine.
Fascinating chat. Can't wait to see the book. Thank you so much. Scoops.
Yes, you can purchase the ebook version of Scoops, behind the scenes of the BBC's most shocking interviews from today.